마틴 루터 킹 주니어 명언 듣기
Martin Luther King 1929–1968 American Civil Rights Campaigner. Martin Luther King Jr. was one of America's most influential civil rights activists. His passionate, but nonviolent protests, helped to raise awareness of racial inequalities in America, leading to significant political change. Martin Luther King was also an eloquent orator who captured the imagination and hearts of people, both black and white. Here's a concise overview of Martin Luther King Jr.'s key achievements. Montgomery Bus Boycott led the boycott that ended segregation on Montgomery, Alabama buses 1955 to 1956. Civil rights leadership spearheaded nonviolent protests and marches to challenge racial segregation and discrimination. March on Washington delivered the iconic "I Have a Dream" speech, advocating for racial harmony and equality. 1963. Civil Rights Act of 1964 influenced the passage of this groundbreaking legislation, prohibiting racial segregation and discrimination. Selma to Montgomery marches highlighted the need for voting rights and contributed to the enactment of the Voting Rights Act 1965. Nobel Peace Prize awarded for advocating nonviolent resistance and fighting racial injustice. 1964. Legacy of nonviolence pioneered nonviolent activism that inspired global movements for justice. Symbol of equality became a lasting symbol of the civil rights struggle and ongoing pursuit of equality. Let's hear Martin Luther King's famous quotes.
In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. The ultimate tragedy is not the oppression and cruelty by the bad people, but the silence over that by the good people. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. Faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. We must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools. If a man has not discovered something that he will die for, he isn't fit to live. I look to a day when people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. Freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. We are not makers of history. We are made by history. Human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. The tireless exertions and passionate concern of dedicated individuals. The function of education is to teach one to think intensively, and to think critically. Intelligence plus character. That is the goal of true education. Our scientific power has outrun our spiritual power. We have guided missiles and misguided men. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. This is why right, temporarily defeated, is stronger than evil triumphant. He who passively accepts evil is as much involved in it as he who helps to perpetrate it. He who accepts evil without protesting against it is really cooperating with it. We may have all come on different ships, but we're in the same boat now. Life's most urgent question is, what are you you doing for others? Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. The time is always right to do what is right. I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear.
Whatever your life's work is, do it well. A man should do his job so well that the living, the dead, and the unborn could do it no better. Man must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression and retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love. A genuine leader is not a searcher for consensus but a molder of consensus. Love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. A man dies when he refuses to stand up for that which is right. A man dies when he refuses to stand up for justice. A man dies when he refuses to take a stand for that which is true. That old law about an eye for an eye leaves everybody blind. The time is always right to do the right thing. We must develop and maintain the capacity to forgive. He who is devoid of the power to forgive is devoid of the power to love. There is some good in the worst of us and some evil in the best of us. When we discover this, we are less prone to hate our enemies. History will have to record that the greatest tragedy of this period of social transition was not the strident clamor of the bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people. We must build dikes of courage to hold back the flood of fear. An individual has not started living until he can rise above the narrow confines of his individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. Every man must decide whether he will walk in the light of creative altruism or in the darkness of destructive selfishness. Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but one must take it because it is right. There can be no deep disappointment where there is not deep love. Everything that we see is a shadow cast by that which we do not see. The quality, not the longevity, of one's life is what is important. Whatever affects one directly, affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. Rarely do we find men who willingly engage in hard, solid thinking. There is an almost universal quest for easy answers and half-baked solutions. Nothing pains some people more than having to think. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war. That the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. All labor that uplifts humanity has dignity and importance and should be undertaken with painstaking excellence. If we are to go forward, we must go back and rediscover those precious values. That all reality hinges on moral foundations and that all reality has spiritual control.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit together at the table of brotherhood. The first question which the priest and the Levite asked was, "If I stop to help this man, what will happen to me?" But the Good Samaritan reversed the question, "If I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him?" To other countries, I may go as a tourist, but to India, I come as a pilgrim. I am not interested in power for power's sake, but I'm interested in power that is moral, that is right and that is good. Change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. And so we must straighten our backs and work for our freedom. A man can't ride you unless your back is bent. Any religion that professes to be concerned about the souls of men, and is not concerned about the slums that damn them, the economic conditions that strangle them, and the social conditions that cripple them, is a spiritually moribund religion awaiting burial. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual doom. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. Every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. Peace is not merely a distant goal that we seek, but a means by which we arrive at that goal. Capitalism does not permit an even flow of economic resources. With this system, a small privileged few are rich beyond conscience, and almost all others are doomed to be poor at some level. That's the way the system works. And since we know that the system will not change the rules, we are going to have to change the system. Never forget that everything Hitler did in Germany was legal. The art of acceptance is the art of making someone who has just done you a small favor wish that he might have done you a greater one. The principle of self-defense, even involving weapons and bloodshed, has never been condemned, even by Gandhi. Violence as a way of achieving racial justice is both impractical and immoral. I am not unmindful of the fact that violence often brings about momentary results. Nations have frequently won their independence in battle. But in spite of temporary victories, violence never brings permanent peace. Never succumb to the temptation of bitterness. A right delayed is a right denied. A lie cannot lie. A riot is the language of the unheard. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go to the mountain. And I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
Law and order exist for the purpose of establishing justice, and when they fail in this purpose, they become the dangerously structured dams that block the flow of social progress. We must concentrate not merely on the negative expulsion of war but the positive affirmation of peace. Shallow understanding from people of good will is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. I submit that an individual who breaks a law that conscience tells him is unjust, and who willingly accepts the penalty of imprisonment in order to arouse the conscience of the community over its injustice, is in reality expressing the highest respect for law. The sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. It is not enough to say we must not wage war. It is necessary to love peace and sacrifice for it. Human salvation lies in the hands of the creatively maladjusted. Oppressed people cannot remain oppressed forever. The yearning for freedom eventually manifests itself. Discrimination is a hellhound that gnaws at Negroes in every waking moment of their lives, to remind them that the lie of their inferiority is accepted as truth in the society dominating them. All progress is precarious. And the solution of one problem brings us face to face with another problem. It may be true that the law cannot make a man love me, but it can keep him from lynching me, and I think that's pretty important. Nonviolence is a powerful and just weapon, which cuts without wounding and ennobles the man who wields it. It is a sword that heals. The hope of a secure and livable world lies with disciplined nonconformists who are dedicated to justice, peace and brotherhood. The Negro needs the white man to free him from his fears. The white man needs the Negro to free him from his guilt. Science investigates, religion interprets. Science gives man knowledge, which is power. Religion gives man wisdom, which is control. We who engage in nonviolent direct action are not the creators of tension. We merely bring to the surface the hidden tension that is already alive. The limitation of riots, moral questions aside, is that they cannot win and their participants know it. Hence, rioting is not revolutionary but reactionary because it invites defeat. It involves an emotional catharsis, but it must be followed by a sense of futility. Since being in India, I am more convinced than ever before that the method of nonviolent resistance is the most potent weapon available to oppressed people in their struggle for justice and human dignity. The moral arc of the universe bends at the elbow of justice. We must use time creatively. Wars are poor chisels for carving out peaceful tomorrows. One of the greatest casualties of the war in Vietnam is the Great Society, shot down on the battlefield of Vietnam.
There comes a time when people get tired of being pushed out of the glittering sunlight of life's July and left standing amid the piercing chill of an alpine November. Nonviolence means avoiding not only external physical violence but also internal violence of spirit. You not only refuse to shoot a man, but you refuse to hate him. At the center of nonviolence stands the principle of love. If physical death is the price that I must pay to free my white brothers and sisters from a permanent death of the spirit, then nothing can be more redemptive. Philanthropy is commendable, but it must not cause the philanthropist to overlook the circumstances of economic injustice which make philanthropy necessary. Property is intended to serve life, and no matter how much we surround it with rights and respect, it has no personal being. It is part of the earth man walks on. It is not man. The question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists we will be. The nation and the world are in dire need of creative extremists. It is incontestable and deplorable that Negroes have committed crimes, but they are derivative crimes. They are born of the greater crimes of the white society. Seeing is not always believing. When you are right, you cannot be too radical. When you are wrong, you cannot be too conservative. A nation or civilization that continues to produce soft-minded men purchases its own spiritual death on the installment plan. Don't let anybody make you think God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. I want to be the white man's brother, not his brother-in-law. On some positions, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? And vanity comes along and asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? Means we use must be as pure as the ends we seek. Almost always, the creative dedicated minority has made the world better. Have we not come to such an impasse in the modern world that we must love our enemies, or else? The chain reaction of evil, hate begetting hate, wars producing more wars, must be broken, or else we shall be plunged into the dark abyss of annihilation. War is a poor chisel to carve out tomorrow. Every man lives in two realms, the internal and the external. The internal is that realm of spiritual ends expressed in art, literature, morals, and religion. The external is that complex of devices, techniques, mechanisms, and instrumentalities by means of which we live. The past is prophetic in that it asserts loudly that wars are poor chisels for carving out peaceful tomorrows.
오늘도 행복한 하루 보내세요. 유튜브에서 파요영어 검색으로 다른 주제 동영상도 살펴주세요. 감사합니다.